Hey guys, it's Dan, host of the Wellness Academy podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Super exciting guest for you guys today. We've interviewed John Dudley, a Stoic, mindfulness coach, a long-time teacher, really wide-ranging topics from powerlifting to Tai Chi. I really enjoyed talking to John, and I really hope that you guys are going to enjoy listening to him and I go through so much for you to take away at home. Enjoy. John Dudley, welcome to the Wellness Academy podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Okay, yeah, pleased to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, if nothing else, what I wanted to do, you and I have been chatting off and on since we organised you being on here with us.
Yes.
Just give us a brief, history where you think that in terms of like wellness, you started out. So you and I discussed, for example, you were teaching, you were training in powerlifting, and you came to a realisation in terms of wellness that you probably wouldn't be able to carry on, or you felt you wouldn't be able to carry on doing that.
Yes, ad infinitum, no.
And you became aware of wellness, give us a bit of a bio, how you felt you got to that point and so on.
Well, there's two strands really to that. And it is that there's a personal strand of my development, which you've mentioned. I started out, I'm a sporting type of person. I'm no great talent, but I've always done a lot of sport. And passing on in my teaching career, I coached sports. I became a basketball coach and so on and so forth. I'd always done strength work from school. In fact, I must have gone to a really unusual school because that's where I started weight training.
Okay.
And that must have been, the first sessions must have been round about when I was 14 in round about 1955 in the winter then. And it was extremely beneficial. And from being nowhere at all, 2 years running then, I won the City Sports 100 yards, and I went on from there doing these kind of things. And I became impressed with this. It becomes a lifestyle, doesn't it? When you start doing something, even as a young person, it becomes part of your lifestyle. You carry on doing it. And so I had a long career teaching both at home and abroad, coaching basketball, a bit of weight training, other sports. And then I came back home and began to become interested in powerlifting. And at one point I ran into a chap who said, more or less said, "You seem a bit stronger than average. Why don't you come and join our powerlifting club?" Which I did. And it was in a thing called the British All-Round Weightlifters Guild. Okay. And we started training. And that's where I came on to things like some principles of training, which you must be aware of, which are consistency, and periodization. You can't carry on going up and up. You've got to have a wave-like approach into training. And that's been one of the, I think, main guidelines behind what I do, and indeed with anybody else, is consistency and a carefully balanced program with a wave-like program, gradually rising, and then a time off. Mm-hmm. And it makes you appreciate the importance of holidays and a break. Many people don't learn that. Because I was a bit older, I probably learned that later. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I took that through, and I retired in 2001, and I was pretty active still then. I was still competing in the 60s. But gradually, I thought, well, I will be able to carry on with the weights after this, but I would like to look around for something that I can carry on really right through the spectrum of old age, or of becoming elderly. You mustn't say old age, we call them oldies and so on. There's so many different names. You think about that 7 Ages of Man from Shakespeare, and is it As You Like It? I can't remember now. But you finish up like a child again, speaking like this. And I think he got it really. Old Shakespeare's really quite good. But anyway, I arrived there and I thought, what can I do? And I was lucky enough to go to a local health club, and I did a taster session of Tai Chi. And I thought, this is really very good. And the chap who did it was an excellent instructor. He was just a bit younger than me. And he still is, funnily enough, even though we've got older. We did Yang style, short form Tai Chi, and I enjoyed it so much I quickly became an instructor, and I went on quite a number of courses by then. And in the course of this, I got drawn into, on one of the courses, he introduced us to a form of meditation called Jingzhuo, which in Chinese I think means quiet sitting. And there's a Japanese version which is called Shikantaza, which means just sitting. And I've been thinking about meditation for some time, wondering what it was like, and how one does when you're approaching some new topic. And I thought, I'm really quite enjoying this. And I went on a couple more courses, and eventually, combined with the Tai Chi, I was able to, and also in the Tai Chi, I did this thing called Qigong, which is, Tai Chi is really part of Qigong. It's movements to bring about health, or energy breathing, I think is the translation. And I began to do this meditation, and I had thought, like most British people, that meditation is going to be very hard to do because we're going to find it difficult paying attention to what we're supposed to be doing and not listening or being distracted by sounds and by thoughts, your thoughts cropping up in your mind. And eventually I realised, with following what we were doing in Jingzhuo, quiet sitting, we were doing just that, and we were paying attention. We were paying attention to our bodies, first of all posturally, and then to our breathing, and then in terms of what you might call becoming aware of the flow of energy around your body, and this is so in both Jingzhuo and Shikantaza, and it's really a form of Zen meditation. Now, what you are doing is you are paying attention to your body. Now, you are being mindful of your body.
Yeah.
So, what that's happened for me is, that's how I realised all this talk about mindfulness, we'd actually been doing it for years.
Well, I'm gonna stop you there, because that was the best bio I think I've ever heard someone ever say in my life. But I think it's a good point, because mindfulness now, are you an iPhone man? Are you Apple? Do you use your mobile phone very often? Do you have apps that you download and anything like that, or is that something that you pay attention to? Do you think?
I do, but in a very limited way. I use it as a tool, really, just to, when I have to, get things done.
The reason I ask,
5
years ago probably, you wouldn't have seen a single app or very limited amount of apps on any phone that has them available that included the words mindfulness or meditation or yoga or so on.
Right.
But the word mindfulness has become more and more of a, I hate to use the phrase buzzword, but it is a buzzword, isn't it? Like mindfulness is obviously, I'm guessing, something which people will be listening to us or watching us to sort of learn about or discover or talk around. But you went from teaching, you were doing powerlifting, which, if for those people that might not know, powerlifting is deadlift, back squat and bench press.
Yes.
One could argue that stereotypically doing that kind of activity, being a powerlifter, isn't necessarily always related to the practices of, I think you said, Jingzhuo, and Tai Chi and mindfulness. Inevitably, like you said, they're probably doing it anyway. But I'm curious as to know how you took what you did being a powerlifter, but also were able to adopt. Was it purely the I'm getting older, I want longevity in terms of my physical activity?
I think when I started, yes, I think that was my main motive. However, once I'd started, I began to realise that, in a way, I really wish I got very few regrets. In fact, I've always got no regrets in life. But I think if I had started doing this stuff earlier, it would have been more useful. I'll tell you an interesting thing about this. You know, these days, you talk about the iPhones and all forms of being able to play music and goodness knows what else. I came through a system whereby I was always taught, when I was being taught, to pay attention to what you were doing.
Yeah.
So you pay it, if you're doing a lift, if you're doing a back squat, you can't think to yourself, oh, yes, you know, have we paid the rent this week? No. You can't do that because you've got a weight on your shoulders. And most of the things you do, if you're practicing martial arts, you know, you're paying attention to that. Now, when I look in gyms these days, I see some beginners, I think they're coming along. Well, it may be all right for them. Let me not criticise them. At least they've turned up to the gym.
There is that.
But, you know, do you really need to have something on your arm that's going to play your music and a massive bottle of water that you're carrying around with you before you've even started? You know, and then the gyms themselves are putting out some kind of music, some of which sounds to me like a dishwasher and a vacuum cleaner having a bit of a fight, and all this. It doesn't help to me. I think you should be paying, and I have always paid attention to what I'm doing, and that's what I've thought. So, in a sense, what I'm trying to say is, I think I would have enjoyed the meditation aspect, because it would have. Powerlifting is a hard sport. You're not messing about like so many other things. Practically all sports are. But in the middle of it all, you've got these moments where you are by yourself, battling with whatever you are doing, and you're quiet, and you're actually quite calm. And
was that something that you found when you were doing your lifts, your bench, etc., etc.? That did you find a calmness in what you were doing?
Yes, I did, because I had verbal triggers.
Okay.
You know, you give yourself, what's one of the ways of learning a skill? You have verbal triggers in what you're doing. So, you know, some of my verbal triggers would be in squatting, would be something like you're standing there off the rack, and then a verbal trigger is slow down, and then I used to have the trigger, but I changed it, of fire up, so that you're going. I changed it later to squeeze, because that initial firing up can be too much.
Okay.
And then one day I lost a squat, funnily enough, straight over the top, and it rolled down to the judge's platform.
Okay.
Didn't go down too well. And I realised that you must apply the force, and it's got to be strongly, but not in too sudden a burst of energy. And that is what I used to use. I used to use certain triggers for certain things. I've still got them now in things I do.
Okay.
So how the meditation comes in is, it's no different for me in a way, paying attention in a meditation to what's going on in the moment, i.e. in your body and your breathing and so on, to what's going on in a particular performance or a particular exercise or a particular lift. And I've been to the gym this morning, and it was just the same there.
So you found in that sense of the present focus an easy takeaway from what you used to do in powerlifting, and you find the same thing in your meditation, etc.
Right, this is it. It was a light bulb moment for me, and it's that moment where you realise that there's your own natural human ability, when you are paying attention to something important to you, you know, a sporting event, or if you're meditating, the very activity of what you're doing reduces all this background, all these sounds and all these thoughts into the background.
Yeah.
And that action, and I found on teaching meditation that this is what people were most aware of, and almost they'd feel guilty if a thought shot up in their mind. I used to say to them, it will happen once you've slowed down a bit, you know, things will crop up, but don't be important. Pay attention to your meditation, and it'll all happen quite naturally. You go away. So the link is, it's paying attention to what you're doing and being in the moment there. And in my case, I used to give myself these certain triggers, verbal cues, about what I was doing or what I was going to do. And I think that's quite common in many sports. I'll tell you a brilliant book on this. If ever you want to read, what was his name? That hurdler who he won the 400-meter hurdles in the Olympics in, was it Mexico? David Hemery.
Okay.
He describes that race, and he said, I felt no effort at all in the race. It went exactly as I rehearsed it. And he broke the world record and beat the rest of the field by 10 metres. And he said, I'd done it so many times. I'd thought about this. Yeah. And those were his cues.
Okay.
He got all these verbal cues going through. But it's a wonderful book to read.
Well, I think it leads really well into... So you and I, we spoke via email and so on before we came here today. And I remember one of the things I wrote down, which I thought was really, really interesting. And it kind of fits, I think, fits in really well with what you're saying, is you talked to me about the dualism of the mind and the body.
Yes.
And I even wrote down about you saying to me, paying attention to the natural movements of the body, particularly breathing, one can achieve a relaxed state by controlling one's breathing.
Did I say that?
You did.
Whoa.
and even mentioned that's not necessarily... Sorry, it's very, very similar to being, as you said, in the zone when it comes to sport. So if you take what we've discussed so far, like,
absolutely,
I think it's fascinating to go from an activity like powerlifting, which is in the title, it's powerlifting, and as you've described, to get up at the bottom of the squat. I mean, my squat is not heavy, my bench is not heavy, my
squat
deadlift
doesn't exist at all now, Dan. Yeah.
But I can understand where you're coming from when you say that to get out of the bottom in a squat, to push the bar up in a bench, to lift the bar up on a deadlift, there must be power involved.
Yes.
I find it fascinating that you've experienced personally a direct kind of similarity between powerlifting and then something which I've done martial arts all my life, but haven't done Tai Chi. But I do know, of course, that it's a much slower, much more controlled, much more deliberate, one might argue, than some other martial arts that do involve the speed or the power.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the dualism of the mind and the body, controlling one's breath to achieve a certain state, you can control your breath to achieve a relaxed state, but you can control your breath to achieve a fired up state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I know that you talked about different types of conscious breathing, and I know you also talked about your meditations within the Jingzhuo.
Yeah.
Would you be able to sort of, let us know what breathing techniques or how you manage the dualism of mind and body in powerlifting, but then also now, how old are you again? 77.
Yeah.
So you obviously use that very differently now, not powerlifting. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah. Again, another little moment. I recall attending quite early on, it must have been about 2005, I think. Somewhere in that era, I just started taking the classes. And this is in Tai Chi. One starts reading round, or these days watching podcasts.
On YouTube
or
and
videos
so on.
or whatever about what's going on. And in your particular field. And I came across a book by somebody called Master T.T. Liang, a Tai Chi book, who dealt with the Yang style short form, which is what we were doing, and the long form, which I also
What's the difference between short form and long form?
Just the number of postures in it. So the short form in Yang, I think it's about 73, but the long form is 100 odd.
Different
postures.
Not in the same class. Would you do 70 postures in the same class, are you telling me? Or that's just what you would learn?
It's like a kata. It's a
very
long
that's what I'm
kata.
trying to relate it to. Like the longest kata I know is 63 moves long.
Yeah. But that's a short form there's a short form in Sun. No, there's a long form in Sun style, which is 73 postures. We won't demonstrate it to you. I might fall over
another video, another time.
But anyway, And he actually advocated using a metronome.
Okay.
So that you would move on. There was about 2 beats on the metronome set to a certain speed that you would move, and then you'd be on to your next move and so on. And I could understand it. And then also, he was on about breathing in a certain way, controlling the breathing to match the movements. Now, we didn't do any of this. We just did the movements. And I was thinking about this over a week or two, and I thought, John, is there anything in this? Ought I to be secretly on my own without the instructor there at home, getting a metronome or counting my breaths or doing this? And I thought, well, no, it's a bit forced, really. And so, however, a later session, sometime following this activity of the brain, we call it thinking, I believe, I was thinking about it, and I suddenly realised that, and I checked it with the members of the group, that actually we were all breathing the same way anyway. Yeah. Because every time we did a brush, knee and push, the breath had been taken in, we brushed the knee and we pushed, and we were breathing out. And so a check with the group, we found that if we were doing the bodily movements, the breathing was following quite naturally the body in this way. And I think that you can, who knows what which is primary, the mind, the body. And I wonder, this is dualism. And it's a bit of a suspect view, I think, actually, but we don't want to talk about that here. But does our thinking lead us? It does when we first learn something, because you have to think out, where do I put my hand here and there? But after a while, once you've got the movements, the body leads it, and you can get the David Hemery effect. You're eventually in the zone. Mm-hmm. And the times you do best are when you are in the zone and the movements. You must find this in martial arts, they become automatic. A friend of mine has got...
Certainly the plan.
Yeah, his children going to judo, I think it is. He said he's amazed by the instructors because they just do relatively free-form sparring and every movement is there. He's very impressed by it, and so am I to hear about it, really.
Well, doing a squat is essentially the same thing that you and I did to sit down in this chair.
Yes.
And it's the same thing that we'll do to stand up back out of it when
and
we
we'll
move.
Probably take a breath in and breathe out as we stand up.
A deadlift. We all, every single day of our lives, pick things up off the floor to put them somewhere else, or we put them down, right? I mean, I lift my cat up and put him down every single day, right? It's a deadlift.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't do a bench press every day, but at the same time, human beings want to be able to lift themselves up off the floor. That being said, technique comes from, practice. Perfect practice makes perfect and so on. But you say that the martial arts instructors, like their free-flowing practice and sparring in judo, it's impressive that they're subconsciously doing that. You were subconsciously being able to lift, I'm assuming, heavy weights since you gained medals in championships with a technique which I know I'd probably be envious of myself. Do you know what I mean? So it's the same, isn't it? You've achieved a level of mastery.
But the carryover is, I believe that when you're doing meditation, what you do is you do things that a relaxed person does. Yeah. So a relaxed person sits comfortably or possibly lies down. In my case, a relaxed person doesn't possibly sit in the lotus position, but many people do. And you can lie down. That's quite a jing. You can do jings. You are lying down, standing, or sitting in an ordinary chair, or indeed in a lotus or half lotus position. And of course, in the Zen version in Shikantaza, the priests, instead of facing into the room, are facing the wall with their eyes open. Okay. To keep them in the present, I assume that is. I don't really know. I don't really know a lot about that side of it. But one of the things I say to people is, what is the most relaxed form of human being we can see, we know of? And it's a baby. the babies haven't learned all our bad habits yet,
Yeah.
you know, and they're pretty, you know, and yet when they're lying on their back, relaxed, asleep, when you look at them, what do you see? You see the baby breathing away. The chest is hardly moving, but the diaphragm is moving. And I'm sure everybody can recall seeing this. I've never heard anybody say there's something wrong with that baby, its chest isn't moving, but his stomach, is it breathing into its stomach? And I can imagine people saying that. But when you are relaxed, that is how you breathe. You breathe like that. So if you can sort of begin to get that feeling that you can breathe in that way. So when you're starting off a meditation, I usually say to people, just take 10 breaths gently in and out through your nose, nothing special. We don't have to learn to breathe in through one orifice and out through another orifice. You know, we're just breathing gently in and out through the nose. I say, well, okay, just take 10 breaths, just relax and just count the breaths. You count it by saying, just count 1 as you breathe in and as you breathe out, and do 10. And then if you finish that, do another 10. And after a while, I say to them, all right now, just place a hand on your abdomen about here. Can you feel any movement? And generally, there's a sort of chorus of grunts that say, no, yeah, I think I can. I'm amazed, you know. I said, well, there you are. You're beginning to breathe like a baby. And that's the kind of breathing we want. We do not want some kind of forced breathing that isn't natural. That's what the nose is designed to do.
Yeah.
And from there...
Where did you learn this?
Where did I learn this?
Yeah, so I think I've been doing a lot of studying of my own recently, more so with the idea of nasal breathing.
Yeah.
Using your diaphragm to breathe. You know, the lungs don't have the ability to contract and relax by themselves. No. It's the diaphragm that you move.
Yes,
that's the muscle.
This is where it's all happening.
So we should breathe from our stomach. But I'm interested as to where you pick that up from.
It's bits and pieces, really. I'm no expert on anything, really, but I kind of pick things up that seem to work for me.
Yeah.
You know,
there's probably a takeaway in that. That's something we can all relate to, I think. Yeah. You don't have to be an expert. You just work out what works for you, right?
Well, that's what I do, and that's what I'm saying now. This is the way I've found things out. So I've found it does work for me. I can get absolutely tremendous satisfaction just from feeling the air in my nostrils cold and feeling my diaphragm. I know it sounds a bit loony, but there you go. You see? And I've actually had a heart rate monitor on and checked myself when I'm doing it. Now I'm thinking about this. I know it's going on, don't I? So I'm conscious of it. But it works. Physically, the changes take place. My heart rate falls. And I now...
Do you ever use it purposefully if you find that you're stressed?
Yes, and I have been doing that for quite some time. And in fact, in a way, I was doing it before I ever found out about it. You know, it's an odd thing. Not feeling the diaphragm, but just taking a moment or two, sitting about and thinking, oh, well, this is...
We've been told it since we were, this big, haven't we? You know, take a deep breath, calm down.
Yeah.
Because we know...
That's right, we do know, but this gets wrongly interpreted. And I think I put this in one of the videos I did. And I'll repeat this. I'm sorry if I'm repeating this. But I am absolutely fed up of watching TV programs, particularly hospital programs, where one person is supporting another. And one person knows this about breathing, or they've got an idea, breathe. But what they're doing is, they're forcing the person almost to breathe in a completely terrible and wrong way. That the person, they're saying breathe, and they're going like this. And I'm thinking, no, we don't mean that. We mean just sit there, gather yourself, even if you're in the chest, and then just... it's very difficult to say. I'm just thinking now. You'll love this one. You'll love this, I know you will, of a phrase from your old mate Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Okay.
Yeah, famous philosopher, German philosopher, Austrian philosopher who came over and worked in Britain. He went to Manchester actually to study aeronautics, but then when Bertrand Russell had brought one of his books out, Ludwig turned up at Cambridge or wherever he was. I think he was Cambridge. And went in to see Russ and said, I must join your classes. I think I've solved quite a few philosophical problems for all time. And he wrote this book. And in the end, he's finally realised that his thesis had started out, he disproved it completely. And he said, oh dear, these things, you can't tell them, you can't say them, you have to show them. These things can be shown, not said. And in a way, what he's talking about is a physical demonstration, a demonstration. But also, it's sort of saying it and becoming aware of what it actually means. So people say, breathe like a baby. Gradually, a kind of osmosis can take over where people begin to realise it. And I've seen it happen in the classes. And people have come out saying, do you know, I never thought I'd be able to do that. And I've really relaxed. I haven't relaxed like that for some time. And to me, that's proof to me, when people give me some feedback like that, that we're on the right lines, that it is working, that you are staying in the moment and you becoming aware of your own breathing and the physical sensations.
Yeah.
The air cool in the nostrils, the slight tension when you breathe in, the shifting of the tension and a loosening of the tension as you sink down as you breathe out. And then there's a pause. What's going on in a pause? Nothing. And some people come along to me and say, oh, you know, I think I'd like to extend this pause. I said, well, just hold on a minute. The sense of breathing is breathing in and out. We don't want you sort of lying on the floor going blue in the face because you love the pause, you know. But no, they will take it on. I've been heartened by that, and I've enjoyed doing it. And I haven't been doing it for a while now in classes, but I'm going to be taking some classes later this summer for some people in the place where I live, and I think I'll enjoy doing that. I'm hoping they will as well.
I've picked up from you so far that you clearly like to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
And haven't stopped doing so, like regardless of age, which is awesome. Like I'm right there with you. I wrote down you had a distance learning course.
Yeah.
I think was it Pathways in Philosophy?
Yes, that's right.
And then you did further study to become an affiliate.
No, not an associate.
An associate, right? Yeah. Okay. So we kind of got on to the like another topic of things that I know that it's something that I'm interested in. There's, I think you'll agree, being a kind of renaissance of the Stoic movement, hasn't there?
Yes.
Which I know we talked about was something else that you've gotten onto. Yeah. As you've progressed. And I thought, if nothing else, for my own benefit, would be cool and beneficial for you to kind of... There'll be people at home, I think, and I know there will be, because every time I've ever heard one of the newer Stoics, so there's a guy, Ryan Holiday, I don't know if you've heard of Ryan Holiday, there's a book called The Daily Stoic. The idea that people think Stoic is one thing, yes, but it's actually a fantastic kind of manual for living if you can take on board some of those principles. Do you want to try and take me, and therefore anybody listening or watching, through maybe some of your favourite Stoic principles that we can apply at home, at work, in sport, or wherever? You know, which ones you benefit from?
The Stoic principles are really quite simple. Just a thought about Stoicism. Stoicism comes from Zeno, a Greek philosopher in about, where was he? The 3rd, 4th century. And Zeno, there were two schools of philosophy that took over from the major Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and anyway, that school came down. And it split into two ways. And one way were the Epicureans, and another way were the Stoics. I think it's a simplification, but that's it. And what it is about them is, funnily enough, Plato is a dualist, is a dualism view of people and the person and life, indeed. But these are what are called monist, or single entity things. Epicureans and the Stoics. But the basic principles of Stoicism, although I don't think the philosophy necessarily stands up as philosophy, I think where Stoicism comes in, you could call it wisdom writing.
Okay.
It's wisdom. It's practical, everyday stuff. For example, one Stoic philosopher in Roman times now, coming up to date, you've got Marcus Aurelius, you've got Epictetus, and of course you've got other writers who were basically Stoics, there's Seneca and even Cicero as well. Yep. They're Stoical people. And these are, approximately 2,000 years ago. Let's take Epictetus, 1st century into the 2nd century. Here's a good principle. Basically, he wrote one thing that's saying, well, I'm very careful who I go around telling these things about taking no notice of the things you can't control and paying attention to the things you can control, like what you're going to eat next and so on and so forth and where you go. And that's a very important principle. But he said, when I go around telling people about this, I find that I get thrown out of everywhere. I get beaten up because I'm telling them plain common sense and they don't want to hear it. He says, it's very dangerous being a philosopher in this time.
Okay.
And Epictetus was a guy who was lame, he was a slave, but he was made a free man by the emperor of the time. I'm just trying to think who it was, I can't remember. But his writing is little bits that have come down, little bits of fragments. And the business of staying in the moment at all times, if you can, and being aware of what's going on and turning your attention to what you can do and things that you can do. And you can't ignore some of the major things that are around you, and you can't control. You can't control the whole business of political structures and laws and so on. They come down to you. They are givens. It's no good trying to go against them. And how you're born into society, it's very difficult, although you can move about. There's a bit of flexibility. But the idea of staying in the moment to deal with it. And I've drawn from that. Again, I've said this in a video before. Take the man Marcus Aurelius. He was a Roman emperor. He lived about 1,800 years ago. He's in charge of the armies in North Germany. Wet, windy, forest, really savage tribes who were big blokes. They were bigger than the Romans. The Romans were little guys, about 5.5 feet tall at the most. The German tribes were really big fellas. And they took a terrible drumming, I use that word again, in the woodlands sometimes. And Marcus's job was to organise his troops and get everybody there. And of course there'd be conferences with all these generals and so on and so forth. It was a pretty hard life, which he did for 10 years, I think. Yeah. And he recorded it from day to day. But some of the things he records are really interesting. He talks one day, I think I've spoken about this before, on the fact that we can all get delight out of seeing a piece of crusty bread. And I think, well, he said, you look at it and there's a crust breaking off and you look at this and it enhances your appetite. And of course he's right, it does. They're selling it in restaurants today. Soup with crusty bread, you see, and that's a joy in the moment of looking at that bread and thinking, whoa, yeah, I'm really going to I'm going to enjoy this. It sets you up for your appetite. And these little things can be picked out of the moment. Now, just today, I've been reading, this is the thing about this stuff, I've been reading a detective story by an author named Donna Leon. And, several times in this, she's got such a good touch as a writer. The family of this detective comes in, and the mother has cooked a Venetian dish, which consists basically of rice and peas. And it's called Reezy Beezy, as far as I can see. And this girl, who was an intelligent young woman, university, is about to get a good job and so on. She goes, oh, Papa, Reezy Beezy, Reezy Beezy, Reezy Beezy. And she makes the detective recall this moment, and he hopes that later in life his daughter will look back on these moments of joy at having a nice meal with the family with one of her favourite dishes. Now that's what I get from this, and I've started doing it more and more all the time.
What's that? When you say you've started doing it, what do you mean specifically?
The joy in the moment.
Okay.
And you can look back on such moments and have experienced the same joy. And it may be a joke, a laugh. It could be a sad moment to give you moments of reflection. And sometimes I haven't made the most of it. I get the impression, and I'm the same as that, well, you get drawn along by the societal norms of where you are. You know, we're all in the race, aren't we, or whatever it is. We're all doing it. And I'd sometimes get the impression that people today do not reflect on their moments of joy, for want of a better word, enough. Make the most of them. You know, if you're sitting around with your mates on a Friday night and it's boogie night, you know, and we're having a pint or two and somebody's cracked a joke. I can remember things now when I was out on gigs with a band I used to play with. We had some tremendous laughs, and I can recall them now. They're not repeatable here, but you know, there was one item where the rhythm guitarist, who shall be nameless, proved himself to be the Shakespeare of swear words. You know, I've never heard the insertion of so many swear words between syllables in words when he was dealing with a chap at a gig where he was a landlord and he wouldn't serve us a pint after it had finished, and Mick was a bit upset by this. But anyway, I thought it was brilliant. But, you know, we don't make enough. Now that I do remember, but there's other times and I think, John, you know, we've done some wonderful things, Audrey and I, touring around Europe, but I don't think I've often made the most of it and thought, whoa, sit back and enjoy this. And you should do, because if you don't watch it, I'm convinced that people are rushing round and they're on a tick list. You know, work, yes, credit, paid the insurance, been on holiday, yes, do. We missed it in between paying the insurance and
I get you.
Doing something else. If you don't watch it, and I'll reveal something to you now. It's the Dudley principle for what is the major force in society at the moment. It certainly isn't God. It's not money. It's not any kind of religion at all. It's not any of the things we've been talking about. It is efficiency. It's an industrial model. Shall I tell you why? Now, do you do this? When I'm going out in the morning, my conduct is entirely ruled by how can I get out as efficiently as possible. So I've got whole stuff lined up to put in my pockets in a certain order. I've got the rubbish to put out there. And if anything disturbs me, I forget the lot. But it's all done in the hope of efficiency. If it doesn't work and I get outside, I'm thinking, oh dear, and it winds me up. So everybody is trying to be so efficient. They're rushing around, they're using the cars, they're going, we'll get the shopping done there, yes, we'll collect that from there. Got to pick the...
Rushing from one thing to another.
Yeah. Trying to be as efficient as we can until we can have that golden moment of calm somewhere. But it never arrives.
Yeah.
Try and make it arrive. And the other bonus from this is thinking about these things. Another little thing I've just read in this book, and this is about wellness, how you're feeling, you know, how things are going on. It is about mindfulness and wellness. In this same story, again, I've just been reading, he goes into a restaurant where there's been a crime, and he's interviewing the two waiters, and he's come back to interview them. And he's asking them if so-and-so was here, and they tell him there's some camera that hasn't been released and so on. And one waiter, he sees he's got a customer, so he goes along and says it. And then he comes back, and the detective's having a conversation with him, and he's treating these people really well. He's not putting any pressure on them. And he says, I'm about to go now, so I'll be round to collect the tape. And he said, how much do I owe you for the drink I've had? And one of the waiters says, oh, well, no, you have that on us. It's entirely on us. And so he says to him, being Italian, he says, so shall I leave a tip? And the waiter says to him, no, I think not on this occasion. But how he described it, in tones, he described it in tones that a maiden aunt would use at the sight of too short a skirt. You see? And I thought to myself, what a good little scene that is, of people getting on with each other, the waiters and the detective having a joke. And you know, those are the little things, like the same was hoping his daughter would treasure this experience in the future. These things do crop up all the time. And if you just take a bit of time to look for them or just pay attention to them, then they will lighten your life. There's no doubt about it. And I didn't realise any of this, Dan, in my working career. But I used to go in and say good morning as I went in. And when I first started going in, the last school I taught at, you know, maybe the one cleaner would be saying, good morning. I'd go and say, good morning, there you go, good morning. By the time I left that school, I went in and I shouted, good morning. You'd hear, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And when I went out at night, I'd be saying, night everybody, good night, good night, good night, good night, good night. And I think maybe I did a bit of good there, and I enjoyed it as well. I'm enjoying it now, even thinking about it, you know.
Simple things.
Simple things. And in a way, it's, you know, this business of being positive for other people, wishing them well, you know, just thinking all the best for them or whatever. I mean, it's not all good. We all have things to put up with that don't go right. But even so, if you recall these moments, you can draw some strength out of them. And when things are not going so well, I mean, again, life is ups and downs. But on the other hand, the downs enhance the ups.
Contrast.
Contrast. So, in the middle of winter, when we're having a rotten day, think, oh, well, I really enjoyed the summer on the strength. You know, that is part of it. Again, I know I'm a retired school teacher, so I've got nothing else to talk about, really. You know, terribly boring for everybody. But, you know, you'd have your normal lads, you know, what do they call them now? Year 11. The end of the week, last period, they'd be saying, oh, you know, I'm bored, you know, and so, yeah, all right, okay. But I'd say to him, look, it's Friday night. Do you know who's going to enjoy Friday night most? Me. Well, why's that? Well, I've been working hard all week and I shall be out having a pint later, you know, first one of the week, and I'll really enjoy it. What have you been doing all week? You've done nothing. So you've been just the same all week. You go home and you'll be saying, I'm bored. You know, and I say, if you do a bit of work and get some, you know, have a go at doing something, some of you, a lot of people do at school, don't get me wrong, they were a great bunch of kids, but some of them, you know, they'd just be in this rut of doing nothing whatsoever. And again, I think the Stoic takes the rough with the smooth, you might say.
Be a wellness principle, I think we could pass on, wouldn't it?
Yeah. If what you are doing is you're always looking to get on with what the central things are for you that you can do. And this other stuff, why do people spend so much time trying to work out why other people have done things? It's completely wasteful, a waste of time, and they attribute motives to them. It's a completely, let them get on with it. You get on with yours, for God's sake.
Control what you can.
Yes, control what you can. You can't control them. You can't control this. You can't control that. You must get on with it. And I think the Stoical way, the philosophy is very shaky because actually they say Marcus Aurelius is always banging on about the natural order. You know, it's the natural order. You keep your way. If you do what you're naturally supposed to, you are living a good life, and this is the way it should be. It's paradoxical. It's not very well worked out. But his wisdom and what he says about how to live your life is very good. And it's not just him. It's Seneca and all these other people as well. And
well, I mean, in terms of places that people can look, is there anything in particular, like where would you say like the majority of your Stoic knowledge has come from? Is there any particular book you've read, particular...
To be honest, my Stoic knowledge has come just from reading, although there is this, Tim Ferriss is his name, his website.
Okay.
That is brilliant.
Good.
That is excellent. I mean, he's translated Seneca.
Tower of Seneca, yeah?
Yeah, the Tower of Seneca. Now, I've got the Lerb edition of Seneca. Lerb editions are where you've got the Latin on one side or the Greek, whatever it might be, and the English on the other. They're brilliant things. But the translations are a bit old-fashioned. But the way he's done that is absolutely
Fantastic.
superb.
So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I always did whenever speaking with people like yourself, we talked about the 3 questions that I was going to discuss with you. And I think for me it's really important that each single person that we speak to, that I speak to, will all have tactics or habits or routines or things that we do on a regular basis that help make the person that we are.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't think you're 77 years of age, so I know there must be some tactics or whatever the words you want to use that you could teach me that hopefully, if I, as you said, am willing to try them out for myself, it'll help me as I grow to be able to do more for the longest time possible. So in terms of your physical wellness, John, you know, are there any things like habits or tactics or routines, things that you do on a regular basis, which you could then attribute physical wellness to?
Well, it's consistency. To have a program that either you've got from somewhere else or you work out yourself. And that's difficult for people who are beginning to start themselves, I know. But once you've decided on a path, it's important to be consistent and carry it through. However, having said that, let us say your plan involves, shall we say, 2 sessions a week or 3 sessions a week. Life being what it is, you won't always be able to do it. So what you do is you do it when you can, and you look at your diary. This is where the consistency comes in, and say, well, I can't do that last week. We'll have to slot it in here and there. But make sure you do it.
Okay.
Mate, it's important to do it. And don't just do the same thing each time. Yes, do the same stuff, the same exercises, keep on with those. But when I say don't just do the same thing each time, arrange for some little form of improvement. Now, whether you should be going to a class or having a training partner, I initially learned all this stuff in groups and with training partners, but I found that I was much better doing it on my own. Yeah. I'm not sure everybody is. I
prefer. I think a class environment suits me. So you know, if I can be one end of the spectrum and you can be the other.
In a way, that's very good for a person who's starting out, because you've got the support of your class members and your club, and they've got experiences of what's gone on. So I think that would be the first one, is consistency. And don't feel guilty if you have to miss a session, particularly for young men, because if you miss a session, you'll find to do 2 more, which is too much. You know?
Yeah.
You've got to, and then put pauses into it. Take your holidays. Don't join a gym while you're away.
Okay.
You know? Take the time out. But you know when your holidays are coming, make that your time off.
Okay. What about mental wellness? You know, the term wellness, I fully believe that taking care of your physical wellness only is not, you know, it's not a full spectrum. And obviously with what we've talked about today, you know, the Stoic Principles, they're a mental wellness. Your meditation, your conscious breathing, these things, is there anything that you use on a regular basis to take care of up here as well as in here?
What I used to use, even before I came to this, was I used to have certain work practices
Okay.
that involved, amongst other things, I would get in probably an hour and a half before work started, and I would leave an hour and a half after. It would vary, but my rule was, and this is a well-known rule, I think, in business circles, don't leave anything on your desk.
Okay.
Do not leave it if you can, even if it is putting it into a file. Now, it does lead to a bit of shoveling stuff off to folks, to shock them next morning and so on, but that's their problem. Then when you get home, that's your time.
Be home.
That's to do.
Yeah,
Be home.
Okay.
And another principle, this is a common practice, I think. I used to keep a notebook by my bed so that if there was any problems that emerged, I would take action to solve them by writing down what I was going to do the next day, and I would do it.
Okay.
It's simple, but I used to do that, and people used to say, "You seem to be handling things," and I used to, "Yeah, well, more or less." But these are the kind of things I used to use, and my other overall attitude, particularly in about I should say the last 20 years of my career, my attitude was not to take a professional attitude in a way, to take the attitude of a working man, which is an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And if what I was doing wasn't good enough, then somebody would have to say, "John, this is no good at all, we're going to sack you." And off you go, collect your cards and coppers, and that will be it. And that used to be my attitude to these things. I'm searching for my handkerchief. I don't know where it's gone. Oh, here we are.
Well, John, I want to say, thank you very much for taking the time out to be here with us today.
Well,
I think that honestly, you've got. I'm trying to think how to describe it. As a way of thinking, a way of behaving, a way of being that I think, for me personally, if I can be in a similar position to you when I'm a similar age, in terms of wellness, I think I'll be operating in a good place. So, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much for being here.
That's very kind, Dan. I hope I haven't misled you in any way.
Not
That's
at
all
all.
I'm worried about it now.
We will see you again, I'm sure,
Yeah.
on our Wellness Academy podcast.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
This is Dan Ball from Wellness Academy. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. You'll find a link on the episode notes. Just tap or swipe over the cover art. You'll also see some offers from our sponsor, and we hope you'll support our show by supporting them. If you like what you'd heard, we'd love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe. It really does help the show. Another way to support us is to answer a short survey at yourwellnessacademy.co.uk/survey and tell us what wellness topics you'd like to hear about. I'm your host, Dan Ball. Our producer is Scott Towns, created by our executive producer, Ben Heathcote, for Wellness Academy.